Okay, good morning. Thanks for being here. You see even more new noses. Welcome. We are in week 5, and today we will do some recap of the last weeks, and then we will do a so-called formative assessment to exercise what will happen on the exam. So I will give you a little essay question in the format and with the instructions of the written exam, so that you get a sort of feeling. It will take roughly 17 minutes, because that is roughly the time I will give you during the exam for one such a assessment, and then I will actually grade that assessment as if it were the exam, and I will give feedback next week. And the next week I hope to test a few of those multiple choice questions with you, taking less minutes. And we will talk about the 5th topic of the course description, being the regulators. The intended learning outcomes are to get used to terminology: regulator, regulatory, authority, inspectorate, principles of administrative law, these types of jargon, to get that into your repertoire with a clear eye on reproducing it in essays. The second thing is to understand, let's say, key concepts. One of the key concepts is market failure. What is market failure? And understanding should result in the ability to write on it and to explain to me. And then the last 3 are more critical thinking skills, as in recognizing the theory in a case, being to be able to interpret, classify, and explain certain phenomena, a legal rule. What is this rule telling you in the context of the course? And to apply, meaning that you draft legal products, or that you draft professional products as if you are a professional vis-a-vis a boss. A little memo, a little explanatory note, these types of products with which you will earn your salary in a future life. We are at the stage that we have quite a few topics covered in the last couple of weeks. I repeat, we try to focus on market failure, so failures of goods and services and market behavior in a capitalistic exchange of goods against consumer money. So that is the field we try to discuss. And then, what are the appropriate rules and governmental arrangement, bodies, inspectorates, civil servants, that make the avoidance of market failure a reality? Because it's nice to observe constitutional settings and the trias politica, and it's nice to look at constitutions or federal or supranational legal instruments like the Treaty on the European Union, where it says we, the people of the European Union, will cooperate in an internal market to make everybody happy. My words. And what does it take to make that an effective arrangement to combat market failure? And an effective as in no state, no European Union, no United States of America is able to be on top of each good and service. There are not enough civil servants to check every iPhone before it comes on the market, whether it explodes or not. And so we have to think of other tricks. One keyword that I maybe did not use enough in this respect is the keyword distrust. So we distrust, we the people, the producers of goods and services. Why? Because we are their victim. They live because we are willing to pay prices, and we know that on the cost price there is a sort of premium called the profit they want to make. Because if it is not with a premium that we purchase our goods and services, then no one wants to be an entrepreneur. Look at yourself. there's not sort of additional incentive, be it profit or dividend or whatever it is called, and then you prefer not to be an entrepreneur. But on the other side, we have trust, because without entrepreneurs, without an economy, there's no society. And so we have to train our youngsters to become entrepreneurs, give them sort of the capacity to be innovative, to be entrepreneurial, risk-taking, and we have to create, we as a society, through the state, sort of infrastructure that facilitates that entrepreneurs pick up that role. Otherwise we're all dying, because then there is no food and so forth. So that is the fascinating paradox, and this institution is part of the governmental attempts to build capacity. And there are all kinds of degrees, including yours, that stimulates you to do exactly those things that on the other side results in distrust. What are you doing? Is it fair? Is it faithful? Are you not tricking your consumers, your bosses, and the like? And that is the sort of philosophical background, and certain courses focus on the trust part. And maybe my course embraces a little bit the distrust part. That's, well, we should keep an eye on those producers. That is sort of the philosophy behind the big theory. The big theory is nothing more than this life cycle, the drawing I handed out in week 1. And then we zoomed in on the technicality of the regulatory state. And the regulatory state is basically a keyword that is zooming in on the appropriate rule package. And the regulatory state is the state that steers to allow the market actors to grow. And then you have other types of states. You have the welfare state, where the state thinks, let's do the steering and the rowing. So let's, as a state, be at the same time the entrepreneur who provides the goods and services for the population. It's a heartwarming idea. But then you run into this problem that a civil servant is not triggered by profit to get out of bed and be innovative. So ultimately, and history shows that on average you produce lousy goods and services, if at all. Because why would you take a risk? Let's go to a meeting and discuss the production rather than produce it. And so that is sort of the caricature of the welfare state. And moving from the welfare state to the regulatory state, we have another keyword, and that is the keyword of liberalization and privatization. Because in history, let's say the 21st century was dominated by sort of the welfare state in the broad sense. And at the end of the 20th century, in the 80s and the 90s, the process of liberalization and privatization took place. So that's sort of historical fact. And that makes us living in a regulatory state. And part of the topics of this course are explicitly to be seen in the light of liberalization and privatization. How can we get from state companies for transportation, health, education, infrastructure, telecommunication, energy, how can we make that a market? And a market is to be taken literally. That is, multiple providers and consumers who can pick and choose. And then there's this idea of the invisible hand that makes you consumers, me consumer, pick sort of the best deal in terms of quality, in terms of price. And then we zoom in on, well, if we are steering as a state, how do we do that? And what is then the topic of responsive regulation? So how can we realize all those objectives? And then Mr. Braithwaite and other authors in the Science on Regulatory State. So there are scholars out there who make a living by writing on this topic. And this class is the result of that scholarly work. And Mr. Bateman was one, and he invented, he's perceived to invent the word responsive regulation. And that is something you're used to, hopefully, and you will get used to more in advanced classes in year 2, 3, and 4, that you work with those sort of buzzwords concepts. And that is partly your sort of luggage, your sort of skill package in your future career, that you say, well, I'm now in a sort of safety security setting, and let's mobilize buzzwords. Well, one of the buzzwords of your program is network society, isn't it? And that stands for something. And basically, when you boil it down to exam settings, and then especially in year 1 and 2, we test you whether you can handle those buzzwords, as in explaining in a little essay what they mean. And that's sort of the stage where you are in, and that is complicated enough. So also my exam, I want you to respond on the buzzword responsive regulation. And then we said, whoa, wait a minute. We said, whatever arrangement we make, it is still the government. And we live in a rule of law society, meaning that legal rules determine what is right and wrong, not those in power. That's the whole idea of rule of law society. And that means that also for the arrangement, particular rules apply, and that set of rules is called administrative law. So whatever arrangement we think of and invent, be it responsive regulation of, we legal professionals do not care how we call it, whatever the state is doing should be in line with the rules of administrative law. And then we pick sort of a little set of them, and those are the principles of administrative law. Let's look at it. So the life cycle. Today we will zoom in on the regulators, but we also had some words already on all the aspects. So each week we add a sort of puzzle piece. We also do not forget that we talk about quick and dirty rules as sort of the bottom line. So market failure means cigarettes with less than 1 milligram nicotine. Means that airlines should facilitate people in a wheelchair. Or that in bottled mineral water, so this product, that there should not bacteria called streptococci or cocci or whatever pronunciation, also known as poop. Realizing that we are in a biological circular system, and that what we produce out of our body holes ends up in nature, is combined with fluids in nature, also called water, and that water is then in the soil, hopefully filtered enough, and then pumped up and sold as mineral water. So the whole idea is that, let's say, somewhere in the circle, the amount of poop in your mineral water is reduced to a state of free of. Alright? And so that is what we talk about when we talk about market failure. And the whole idea of making a whole class and a science out of it is that if we leave it to trusting the producers of these bottled waters company, they might say, well, a little bit of poop, no one noticed, because the body can take quite a few bacteria. So it's quite expensive to check every bottle. So if on average only one person dies per year, okay, you know? Well, that is not what they explicitly say. But if you have designed a bottled water plant, and the compliance officer says, no poop in the water, and then the engineers say, do you know how much that costs to check that's water on poop? And that is why we have quick and dirty rules in EU directives and in the United States of America, in the American legislation, that sort of dictates this behavior or production method, and the arrangement is, how do we control whether they comply? We open every bottle, and it is inconvenient because we have this sort of sealing so that you know that no sort of tap water is included. And then how do you test bottles if they're already sealed? So then you have to have regulators or inspectorates inside the plant. Well, if you're inside the plant, you can better make the bottle yourself if you're there. Anyhow, that saves us employees, and then you're back in the welfare state, that the state is rowing instead of steering. And so that is, in concrete terms, what we try to talk about. And then, obviously, in the let's say, equivalence in construction, how fire safe are the ceilings, and so forth. And so also the topics that you meet in other courses are having these corresponding rules. And so that is what we talk about. And these rules are part of the interventions in the broad sense. That the state starts to intervene in the market with broad sense, general rules that are applicable to everybody. We call that ex ante, so prior to market failure. And there we met 5 C's, 5 different ways with which a state can intervene in the market, in a broad sense, ex ante, so prior to complications. So the 5 C's are prior. And then the classic one is the command. So this is command. And command comes with punishment. Do this, and if not, you end up in jail. It's the criminal law version. Do this, or you end up with a fine. That is the regulatory state, regulated market consequence. But obviously, that is not the only thing. In a network society, in modern 21st society, where we are distrusting and trusting companies at the same time. And so societies are capable to do wonderful mental activity. You have 2 emotions at the same time. You can also apply other tricks. One trick is the competition trick. Give the consumers an incentive to purchase environmentally friendly cars by taxing it lower. Or, if it is about the objects of pleasure, like cigarettes, you can make them so expensive that maybe people look for other pleasures. Mineral water. And so, all those who smoke realize that they pay an insane amount of money for those cigarettes. And that is, for 90%, taxation. So you subsidize this building. Thank you, smokers. Yeah, but that is an incentive to avoid market failure. Market failure as in dying people from lung cancer. Because they look innocent, those lovely white cigarettes. And they were perceived as innocent, as to the story that in the past lecturers were smoking during class and doctors were smoking while treating you. That is not a lie. To the realization, whoa, they actually kill. So let's discourage the market of cigarettes. The last resort is forbid them, as we do with other drugs, but that happens not to work. Look at the block on alcohol in the United States. In the 30s, 20s, and it didn't work. Look at hashish and cocaine in our current societies. It's all forbidden all over the globe, except for Uruguay, but it doesn't work. And so competition is then the tool. Yes, finger.
If the smokers would stop, like everyone, or at least 90%, then you wouldn't be able to subsidize this building, right, from the smoker money.
Well, that comment should not be taken too literally, but indeed.
Then you will lose a quite large amount of money as a government.
Yeah, so states who rely on their income based on, let's say, this tool, end up in trouble when the market failure is effectively combated. Sure, then as a state you have to look for other sources of income. And states are always creative. In the last 10,000 years, states managed to tax everybody one way or the other. And there were always people who managed to get away. And unless we nationalize Cayman Islands and Bahamas, then the big companies continue to evade taxes, which is another class. Yes?
But wouldn't the state also spare a lot of money if everyone stopped smoking because you wouldn't have to care for them, the health care?
Exactly. So this is definitely another class, but indeed, sick people cost the society a lot of money in terms of they do not show up at work. Somehow states subsidize healthcare systems, even if you have to pay yourself a part, and so forth and so forth. And so there's a lot of math possible in these type of things. Consensus, the cheapest solution. Let's talk to the entrepreneurs, be it accountants, be it lawyers, be it doctors, and say, hey, if you control the quality yourself, then we don't have to pay for it. And so consensus that, yes, quality is important. People should rely on their accountant, doctor, and attorney at law. And so let's play on their emotion, that they feel themselves as professionals and have them control themselves, self-regulation. And then you stimulate that as a state by saying, everybody who wants to be an accountant, doctor, and attorney at law is obliged to enter into a contract with the professional body, otherwise you're not allowed to wear that title. And then consensus, you're voluntarily member of the quality control mechanism that is then paid by the professionals themselves, including investors. Communication. The fourth tool is, well, let's explain to everybody that eating vegetables is healthy, that smoking is bad for your health, that driving safely, wearing safety belts, not speeding is also good to avoid market failure. And those are then examples, a little bit at the rim of the market. So that is a tool, and then the code is the future, and that you physically make it impossible that market failure exists. Example in the financial market, if you are basically controlling the money flows and the amount of money as a state, and then banks cannot play with it, cannot trick consumers with too less money or too much money. But those are interventions that are not that much used yet, and that is the field of innovation in the field. Then we move to the ex post intervention. So, what is the possibility of a state to actually react to a cigarette that is not right, or bottled water that is poisoned, or airlines that are unfriendly to people in wheelchairs? What are then the possibilities? And we call that intervention stricto sensu, because that is sort of the intervention that market actors really feel. And so then they feel the intervention as in they get a letter, or they get an inspectorate or an authority on their doorsteps. Ding dong, I'm inspecting your goods and services. And I think that's not right what you're doing. And then you have two aspects. One, you have in the responsive regulation theory the two pyramids, the pyramid of capacity building and the pyramid of sanctioning. And the capacity building is a little bit related to communication. And so let's explain to producers of goods and services that consumers should be protected and so forth. Let's explain and stimulate market actors to take it serious, to hire compliance officers,